Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mental Health Monday. Happy Monday. I hope y'all's week has gotten off to a wonderful start. So, if you don't know who I am or what you're watching, my name is Latanya Brumfield. I'm a coach at Always Up Coaching. We are a life coaching firm. We help everybody to unlock their potential, and our mission is to make a difference in everybody we encounter's lives. And this Facebook Live that happens every week, Mental Health Monday, is part of us putting that mission in action. So we come here every Monday with a topic, a mental health topic to talk about. And we have a real life conversation about it, um, more so from the perspective of what can we do about it, from a day-to-day life, real world perspective. How can we address that mental health issue? What do we need to know about it? What's important about it? What's dangerous about it? We talk about a few things concerning that issue. Today we're going to talk about phobias and fears. But first, I'm going to remind you that obviously this is sponsored by Always Up Coaching. We are running a giveaway, and the last day to enter the giveaway is on tomorrow, the 28th. So I'm going to invite you to enter. The giveaway is for $100 cash via Zelle, Venmo, or Cash App. That's the first prize. And there's going to be multiple second prizes, which will be a hardbound journal. We talk a lot about journaling, writing things down, planning. A hardbound dot grid journal can help you do all of those things. And I think everybody should have one. It's an essential to live your best life. Unless you're one of those people who can store everything on their brain and access it at will, you need a journal or a planner or a notebook of some kind. So I invite you to enter. Click that link, fill out the form in completion, follow the directions for entry on the form, and you will be entered. As of last check, there were less than 10 people who had entered. So there's a handful of people who have a very good chance of winning $100. Also, I invite you to follow all of our socials. And somebody, everybody actually, could use a venue like this in order to view a discussion or participate in a discussion about mental health. Hi, Miss Weaver from North Carolina. Welcome. I'm broadcasting from Louisiana. I'm glad to have you today here. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. Welcome. But yeah, everybody feel free to make comments as we go along. Miss Weaver here is joining us, and I appreciate you viewing us. Don't forget to enter the giveaway, okay? And I will get you that. If you win, I'll get you that $100, or I will mail you a journal all the way to North Carolina. So take a moment to share this feed to your friends and family. We change up topics week to week. Sometimes we circle back around to other topics. Either way, I think every topic and every week is beneficial for somebody, because if it won't help you, it will help someone you know. So the topic of discussion today is phobias and fears. Phobias and fears. I always like to say, let's get on the same page. So let's just jump out the gate and talk about what is a phobia or fear. Obviously, a fear is something that's pretty well explained, right? On the other hand, a phobia is something that goes a little beyond the regular fear. For example, I have a slight fear of flying, but I don't have a phobia of it. I can get on a plane, do fine, minimal anxiety. Once I get in the air and we're cruising, I can take a nap. That's a difference between that's a fear. Other people cannot fly at all because they have a phobia of flying in airplanes. Those are the two differences. So we're going to be talking about both today, because that spectrum could go from one extreme to another, right? So, but a lot of the tools to deal with them are the same, whether it's a fear or whether it's crossed into the severity of a phobia. So fear, some people think fear is similar to anxiety as well. The difference between fear and anxiety, often anxiety is something you feel and you can't always identify a reason. When you have a fear or phobia, you know exactly why you're feeling the way you feel. So that's a little bit of differentiator. And to make it more clear, fear can cause anxiety, but anxiety um, can't necessarily cause fear. It can, but it can't necessarily. It doesn't always. So there's some causes of fears and phobias. Sometimes there's some biological factors, like um, genetics. Some people are more prone because of their genetics. Hello, Lawrence from Atlanta. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on Mental Health Monday. I hope you enjoy it and come back and see us again for the next episode next week. So genetics are involved as well, right? So some people are more predisposed to have fears and phobias just because of that's just it's in their DNA, unfortunately. Also, sometimes certain brain chemistries caused by either an alteration in brain chemistry can be caused by a lot of things. For example, hormonal imbalances, like postpartum depression, right? It can be caused by nutritional deficiencies, right? It could be caused by exposure to toxins, right? Anything that would cause an alteration in brain chemistry may make you more predisposed to a fear or a phobia. So environmental factors, that would include like your physical environment, like living around toxins, right? But it can also include um, having been in an environment where you're exposed to trauma, right? Frequently exposed to trauma, heavily exposed to trauma, i.e. in children who grew up in an abusive family where they witnessed physical abuse, even emotional or psychological abuse. That would predispose that child throughout their life to be more likely to have fears or phobias. And the last thing is just personality factors. People develop personalities over the course of a lifetime, and it could be, developed by an environmental factor. Environmental factors do create and develop your personality. So things like personalities like perfectionism, right? Or pessimism, just being a pessimistic person. Those types of people tend to be more likely to develop a fear or a phobia. So signs and symptoms, all of us have been scared, afraid, or in fear at some point in our life. So we're kind of familiar with them. But just to go over a few physical symptoms: increased heart rate, sweating, shaking, stuff like that, right? Sometimes there are no obvious physical symptoms. A lot of the symptoms can be not readily measured, such as your blood pressure can go up, right? And then we have behavioral symptoms, right? That's like avoiding things, like avoiding flying, right? It could be procrastination, right? So if I have a fear of snakes and I know my outdoor storage room may have snakes, I may avoid cleaning out that storage room for a very long time for fear of the snakes, right? Or the possibility even of snakes, right? And then emotional symptoms, that's when we talk about the anxiety, the panic attack, the sadness. Fear can lead to sadness because you may not be able to participate in activities with friends and family members, or go on the trips or do all the things you want to do. You may not be able to live life to its fullest because of a fear or a phobia, and that can produce sadness. So there are emotional symptoms tied to fear and phobias. So let's start talking about what we do about them, okay? And we're going to go into some specific types of phobias when we talk about what we do about them. But just overall, here are some tools, okay? Hey, Sharissa. Hi, I'm happy to see you. It's always good to see unfamiliar faces in the chat of Mental Health Monday. Thank you for joining us. You haven't missed much. I was just getting started. I was going over the definition of fears and phobias. We were contrasting it with anxiety, and we talked about some of the emotional, physical, and and invite some of the symptoms. We were talking about some of the symptoms in general, and we were just about to go into more so some strategies to deal with fears and phobias. And welcome to Mental Health Monday. I'm glad to see you. So strategies. Okay. Let me just start with saying that strategies will vary from person to person and fear to fear. So like my strategy for overcoming a fear of flying is going to be completely different than my strategy of overcoming a fear of spiders, right? Completely different, because flying is not something that most people do every day, right? It may be a once, twice, maybe 3 times a year thing. Whereas spiders are often encountered by some people on a daily basis, depending on where you live, right? You may live in a rural area where spiders are something you see regularly. So as we go over these, some of these will be applicable to certain fears and some not. So just keep that in mind. And that's why we're going to go into some specific phobias when we talk about strategies. And just, I Googled what the top 10 phobias are in the US, just so we can all know we're not alone, because it's likely some of us have one of these fears on this list, right? So the number one was social phobia, or social anxiety disorder. And that's a fear of social situations or just being out in public and judged by others. Then number two is just they lumped a general category of specific phobias. That's a specific fear of objects or situations, and that includes like the flying, the heights, the spiders, stuff like that. And then agoraphobia. This is a fear of being in a situation or a place where escape might be difficult or embarrassing. I actually have agoraphobia. It's very, very mild, but I do not like to go places where there is a lot of people. And, if something happened, I wouldn't be able to get out as quickly as I would like to. That is a level of fear of agoraphobia. And I don't know if it would go into a phobia. I guess it would go into a phobia because it's a very specific fear. But it's not, for me, it's not so severe that it creates a problem in my lifestyle. But we're going to talk about that in a minute, and some of the tools I practice for agoraphobia. Claustrophobia. A lot of people have a fear of enclosed and tight spaces. It's a very, very, very common fear or phobia people have. And acrophobia is the fear of heights. A lot of us have that. I'm not as scared to go up on tall things and do the heights, but when I look down, there's a feeling that comes over my body. So I have some level of fear of heights, even an irrational fear, to a point where I know I'm not going to fall when I'm looking down, but my body still senses that sensation of fear. Another one is aerophobia. That's just the official name for fear of flying. The next one, trypanophobia. That's a fear of needles. Now, this is my first time learning this word. However, many of y'all know that I'm a registered nurse, so I encounter people with this fear a lot, y'all. It's a very common fear. I would say, I would guess maybe 20% of the population have a fear of needles to some extent. And it's some fears are normal and healthy. It's just when it tips over to unhealthy and it creates symptoms in you that are bad, like, panic attacks and such, is when it becomes a real problem. Astrophobia, that's a fear of thunder and lightning. Cynophobia, which is a fear of dogs. And hemophobia, and that's the fear of the sight of blood. Those are the people, when they see blood, they faint, right? So that just FYI, a little trivia there for you. Top 10 common fears in the US. So tools and strategies. So number one would be relaxation techniques, okay? Obviously, if your fear or phobia is so severe that you cannot relax around in the presence of that fear or phobia, you may need to remove yourself from a specific environment, unless you're trying to overcome the fear or phobia. But get somewhere where you could take slow, deep breaths, right? That's a relaxation technique. Or another one would be meditation, yoga, um, listening to calming music. Relaxation techniques is anything that causes relaxation in you, right? So it could vary from person to person. Um, the next one would be something called cognitive behavioral techniques, and this is something we're going to revisit a lot. And basically, it's changing the way you think about the thing that you're scared of, right? So it involves something called exposure therapy. And what exposure therapy is getting around that thing and just giving yourself some self-talk in your head, right? So exposure therapy can be graduated, right? So if you are afraid of spiders, for example, I'm probably going to use this example a lot, flying at spiders, because they're common and they're easy to think about when we talk about exposure therapy and stuff like that. You may just start with looking at pictures of spiders while doing something relaxing, right? So listening to your favorite relaxing music while looking at spiders, um, doing some deep breathing or some other kind of relaxation technique while looking at photos of spiders. Next, you may even do toy spiders or rubber spiders and work yourself up to looking at them more in a 3D world, touching them even, and doing those relaxation techniques and self-talk. And then finally, maybe go to the zoo where there's an exhibit of spiders, and sit there and make yourself watch them. And you could increase the duration of time, right? Increase the type of exposure, increase the duration exposure. And you just get your body and your mind used to that thing. And the self-talk is going to be, this thing cannot hurt me in this moment, right? Because most of the time when we see a spider, it's not going to kill us, right? It's not even going to bite us when we see a spider, the overwhelming majority of the time, right? So there is no reason to have fear. There's no logical reason. And that kind of self-talk is what you're going to do with cognitive behavioral techniques. And the last one is lifestyle changes, right? So remember we talked about the brain chemistry and hormones and stuff like that. Sometimes to manage a phobia, we need to make sure we're completely healthy and able to address it. So regular exercise, healthy diet, adequate amount of sleep, all those things can contribute to making a fear worse or a phobia worse, right? And so those are just the overall basic techniques, right? And now we're going to talk about specific phobias and overcoming them. And we're going to incorporate some of those techniques and other techniques as well, right? And if y'all have any questions about specific phobias, please feel free to drop it in the comment section, and we will discuss your specific phobia. Or if you want to inbox me if you're embarrassed, because I get it. Some people are embarrassed by the things that they have fears of, because sometimes it can be very unusual. So if you want to take a moment and go message me on in my inbox, I will be happy to make sure I address that. So when we're talking about specific phobias, we need to take into account what the phobia is. What is triggering the sensation of fear or anxiety? What trips the fear over into anxiety, right? We need to consider how severe the thing is. So how you deal with it is dependent on the severity, right? Because if we have a severe fear of spiders, we don't want to start off with exposure therapy at the zoo where we're looking at this exhibit of 100 spiders, right? We need to stage things out, right? So consider the severity when you're staging how you're going to overcome that fear. And you need to be positively reinforced, either self-reinforcement or by a supportive friend or family member who can help you overcome that fear. Now, that being said, that family member cannot also be scared of the thing, right? Both of you can't be sitting there at the spider exhibit both freaking out, right? You need somebody who can be supportive for you in the moment, okay? So just be cognizant of that. So how do we overcome a fear of social situations? So some might call it social anxiety disorder, or the other name for it that we mentioned earlier was social phobia, okay? So what can we do to overcome that? So one is building skills, right? So you'll feel more comfortable in a social environment. So communication skills, how to start conversation, how to listen. Then you got gradual exposure therapy to social situations. So if you don't like to go to big parties, start off with the little parties, right? And then make yourself go and make yourself be exposed and practice that relaxation techniques and such while you're there. And you got to practice assertiveness and self compassion. You got to be able to tell yourself that you can say no to certain events if you can't handle it, right? And you got to be assertive about saying no, because we all have that friend that is on the opposite end of the social spectrum, right? Wherever you may lie, right? I live on the less social spectrum, right? I am an introvert. I have a little bit of a social anxiety, especially if I'm going somewhere that I'm not in an environment that I'm not familiar. Even if I'm with people I'm familiar with, sometimes the environment is enough to trigger a little social anxiety. But sometimes you can be with people you could be it could be the opposite, you're in a familiar environment, but you're with people you're not comfortable with. So um depending on where you lie on that is how you're going to overcome it, right? But it's important to be able to forgive yourself from not being social. Some people tend to beat themselves up for not being a social butterfly. Some of this, like we talked about earlier, is related to our personality, right? It's just part of our personality. And the trick is to be able to tailor your lifestyle and overcome the fear of phobia to an extent in which your lifestyle is not adversely impacted. So, very closely related to social phobia or social anxiety disorder is agoraphobia. So, that's gradual exposure to public places and public events, right? So you might start with a little, picnic in the park, with that's open to the general public, at a public park. And then you might work your way up to going to the Super Bowl, right? We know there's a very heavy attendance at the Super Bowl. So same thing there. Build a support system. Have somebody walk this journey with you and supporting you in doing this thing, right? Don't try to go to the Super Bowl by yourself out the gate, right? Start off with the small things and be vulnerable with somebody and let them know that how this thing is impacting you and how you need help. You got to be able to ask for help, y'all. And in a minute, in a little bit, we're going to talk about when to go to a mental health professional. But throughout all of this, it's very key to tap into your support systems and ask for help. So again, exposure therapy, having a support systems, and for some people who develop panic attacks, you may need specific coping skills, and some people who have them frequently may even need to see a provider when they go to certain situations, because there are actual drugs that can help with panic attacks, panic disorders, etc., and help keep you from tipping over into that major panic attack while you're trying to work through the exposure therapy. So the next fear is fear of flying. This is pretty common amongst people. And at one point in my life, I was a little bit more afraid of flying than I should have been. But, as throughout my adulthood, as I began to fly more, I developed my own techniques for overcoming my fear. And this is one of them, and it's on my bullet points here, is understanding the flight process. So knowing all the things that can and will happen during a normal flight. For example, turbulence, right? Um, I haven't been on a lot of flights with turbulence, but I've been on a couple flights where the turbulence was severe. But and I'm not going to tell you I wasn't scared in the moment of the turbulence, but because I understood what turbulence was and what it caused, and that it was a normal thing to happen on a flight, it allowed me to actually be less fearful in the moment, right? So understanding what the process of flying is, understanding um, the actual chances of something happening, right? So one thing that I rested upon when I was overcoming my fear of flying was that at one point I read a statistic that said you were X amount more times more likely to die in a car accident than you are on a plane. So as I practice exposure therapy and I would go on flights, that would be my cognitive thought process, right? When we talked about cognitive behavioral therapy, would be like, why are you so upset? You get in your car every day, sometimes multiple times a day, and you don't have this level of fear, even though you're more likely to die in a car accident. So is it rational to be afraid of flying if you are in more danger in your car? So that's one tool I used to put my fear in check when it came to flying. Practice relaxation techniques during the flight. So this is when you're going to have your music playing device of some sort, right? So your earbuds are going to be in. You're going to be listening to your favorite music. You're going to possibly be listening to a favorite audiobook for distraction, right? You can, while you're listening, close your eyes, practice that deep breathing relaxation techniques. You are going to be actively engaging during the flight in those behaviors. And you'll find that over time, if you do that every flight, automatically your brain and your body will remember what it feels like to be on a flight. And it will immediately start to do those things that relax you. So the last thing you would do would be if it's still severe after you try all of those things, or if it's so severe that you can't even step on a flight, this is the point where you might want to get professional help, i.e. A mental health therapist, a cognitive behavioral therapist, or you may want to possibly see if maybe you have any other diagnoses that are making this fear phobia more severe. So here's another good one. And I say it's good because a lot of us have this. I had this before, and that's a fear of public speaking. I am no longer afraid of public speaking, obviously, because I'm here on Facebook Live talking to y'all. But this is a common one, and it's a common one mainly because I think most of us don't, at some point in our lives, ever have had the experience, never have had the experience of public speaking. So the fear is coming from the unfamiliarity with it, the lack of experience in practicing it. Okay. More so than any rational thought process that might think something bad will happen. And a lot of times the thought process will be, people will think I'm stupid. People will think I'm not a good speaker. Some people have like fear of physical judgment. There's different layers of fear that people have that play into the fear of public speaking. So it could be a very individual fear when it comes to addressing a fear of public speaking. But a lot of overcoming the fear of public speaking is preparing and practicing, right?
Don't forget to take out your trash cans.
So yeah, I gotta reprogram Alexa to remind me about the trash at a different time, because she did that last Monday. But thank you, Alexa. But preparing your speech, knowing what you want to talk about, being confident in what you're talking about. So that helped me a lot. And when I realized that, it was like, my previous experiences with public speaking, which I thought were horrible, were often public speaking in which I was induced to speak, either through school or strongly encouraged by someone else. And they told me what they wanted me to talk about. What I realized about myself is when I speak about things I want to speak about, it's not as intimidating or scary because I'm confident about what I'm saying and I want to talk about it, right? So preparing for the speech and choosing what you're going to say. Using relaxation techniques before and during the speech. Those slow, deep breaths, listening to some good music, thinking about a pleasant experience or event. All that can help you before you get started. Also, that cognitive behavioral therapy, if you feel that heart starting to beat fast, I do that even before I do something or go on live or go on stage or whatever. I have that moment in which I'm like, oh, what am I doing? It's a natural thing, y'all. Some of these things are natural thought processes to go through our head. It's a protective mechanism by our body and brain to protect us from what could be perceived as an adverse situation. So it's normal to feel that way, but what's abnormal is to not put those thought processes in check. So, if I'm about to go on stage or talk to you, come on live or whatever, I have that thought process. What is the worst can happen, right? And that leads me to maybe some thoughts of what the worst can happen is, right? And then I tell myself, what can I do to mitigate and protect myself from that happening? And first of all, is that worst thing really a valid worst thing? Is a realistic worst thing to happen? So I take myself through that thought process, right? So coming on live with y'all, what is the worst thing that could happen? Somebody thinks I'm stupid. I don't really care what people think anymore, right? So that's a way to address your fear of public speaking if that's an issue for you, right? I say something I don't mean to say. Well, I have human error. I won't be the first person who came on live Facebook and said something in error, right? And I won't be the last. It's human error. It's normal, right? So taking yourself through those thought processes and canceling out those negative thoughts as far as why you might be afraid. At some point, I got to remember to check my inbox to see if any of y'all inbox me with questions or commentary. So yeah, take yourself through that thought process. Be rational with yourself. Have that inner discussion with that part of you because there's part of you that doesn't want to be afraid, and there's part of you that's choosing to be afraid, right? So let those two people in your head have that conversation and determine if all those thought processes are rational. So that's public speaking. So here's a good one. And it's a valid fear, right? How to manage fear of medical procedures, okay? As a registered nurse, I see this a lot. Currently, I'm working in a recovery room part-time, and I'm able to see people wake up, and it's almost hilarious in times because some people will wake up with the same level of fear that they went to sleep with, right? So they'll wake up panicking, right? Because they think they haven't had the procedure yet, right? And then you remind them that it's over, and there's this wave of relief that comes over them, right? Some people wake up in shock, like because it happened so fast. Because anesthesia done right, you close your eyes, and then you open them, and this procedure's over, right? So I'm able to see a lot of the confusion, joy, shock, panic of people waking up from anesthesia. So I can imagine what they felt like going to sleep, right? So how do you overcome the fear of a medical procedure? Because that's something that we all will need to have at some point, right? Some kind of procedure. Some of us may be lucky enough to escape it, but most of us probably won't, to be honest. So you got to understand the process of the procedure. That includes, the procedure you're having, what's really happening, the process and the anesthesia, and what happens with anesthesia. What are the expectations of pain? A lot of people fear the pain, right? Especially if they've never had severe pain, right? Or if they've had severe pain, they have to fear the pain. So a reasonable expectation of fear of pain, a reasonable expectation of pain can help with the fear of the procedure, right? And also knowing what pain you should expect can also help with dealing with the pain, right? Again, relaxation techniques. I'm just not even going to say any more about that. Communicating with the people who were going to be performing and participating in the performance of your procedure, right? Your surgeon, your anesthesiologist, your nurse anesthetist, the nurses that are going to be getting you ready for surgery, the nurses that are going to be waking you up. All those steps of the process, communicate with those people and help them answer your questions to help alleviate your fear. That's important. So moving along, what about a fear of animals? I actually have people in my family who have experienced fear of animals, right? And it was based on experiences, but also what was out of proportion to the experiences, right? Because we all know that not all animals are going to hurt you. Y'all give me 1 second. I got to plug up my computer. I forgot to plug it up and it's going to go dead. Give me a sec. Okay, I'm back. I'm not going to randomly cut off on y'all because my battery's dead. Plug back in here. Okay. So, pick up where I left off. So, fear of animals. So, same thing, similar as with like flying or whatever else, exposure therapy to the animal, right? Also learning about the animal, learning how to identify a dangerous dog from a safe dog, learning those cues or whatever. So when you're, riding your bike on the street and somebody's walking your dog, knowing when the fear is rational fear and you need to escape and escape and go the opposite direction, and also knowing when the fear is an irrational fear and the dog's under control and the dog is calm, learning those cues from that animal, right? That can help you overcome the fear over time. And relaxation techniques, I said that already many times. How to manage your fear of germs. And this is a difficult one because you're in fear of something you can't even see, right? So how do you do exposure therapy? So exposure therapy would be often going in environments where you think there may be a lot of germs, right? But also understanding the actual risk of infection, right? So if you are scared of picking up a cold virus, what are the odds of that happening at the grocery store? But also, what kind of things can you do to mitigate from picking up that virus, right? So using hand sanitizer, not touching your face. If you have a shopping cart, wiping it down when you arrive, right? Um, being aware of yourself touching items throughout the shopping trip. All those things can help you overcome those fears. And also being very rational about the thought. If you get a cold virus, is it the end of the world, right? So having fear of germs is a very specific fear that a lot of people actually have, especially post pandemic, right? So here's a big one too: how to manage the fear of failure, right? So you need to identify the negative thought patterns and challenges that you may have, and challenge those thought patterns, right? Are they realistic thought patterns? Are they valid thought patterns? Why do you fear failure? What happens when you fail? Is that thing that happens when you fail the end of the world? Does life go on when that thing happens? Is it really that big of a deal? Having those thought processes in your head are very huge for overcoming the fear of failure. So you need to set realistic goals and take actions toward them, right? So if you have a fear of failure, let it motivate you to set realistic goals, right? Are you setting your goals way too high? I deal with this a lot in life coaching and helping people achieve goals. Like, let's be real here. You know, you're not going to build a a multi-million-dollar business in a year, right? It could happen, but the odds are very, very low. So don't set that as your goal, because when you don't achieve it, you may feel like you failed, right? That could be an aspiration. It could be a vision of something that could happen. But when you're setting your goal, set something that's realistic. Then take your action toward the goal. Set the goal, make a realistic plan to go along with the goal, and start acting, right? And that's how you can, first of all, be successful more often, so you won't have to deal with the fear of failure. But when you do face the failure, you can realize that I did everything reasonable to prevent failure. But sometimes failure just happens. Sometimes there's some unknown components that we weren't aware of, that we didn't plan for. But it just happens, and it's just life. None of us are perfect and get everything right all the time. And the last tip for that is celebrate your successes. Sometimes a failure in your eyes may actually be a partial success. So celebrate the part that is a success. And those positive feelings of the celebration can help you overcome that feeling you feel when you're enacting the next plan and to overcome those fears, right? So here's a good one. Fear of rejection. So fear of rejection is that fear that someone will not approve of you, will not assess you as worthy. Um, so in order to overcome the fear of rejection, you just have to build what we call resilience or grit. You just have to become stronger, right? And part of that is just by being the best you can be, right? And realizing that you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, right? Some people, you can be an absolute perfect person um, in every way, and someone may still reject you, and that could have nothing to do with you, right? So that's where those thought processes come in. Sometimes that rejection is not from you, right? So that's why you got to realize that even in the perfect scenario, you may still encounter rejection in your life. So you want to develop healthy communication skills and set healthy boundaries when it comes to people, right? Choose who you will let criticize you, right? Choose who you will ask feedback from. Don't set yourself up to be rejected by that same person all the time who's always going to never find you worthy, right? We know those people, right? Don't go to those people and ask them anything about you. You go to the people that you deem worthy of being in your life and that you have real relationships with, right? And that you have developed healthy communication with. Those are the people you want around you, right? So that is a mitigation for fear of rejection. Don't be around the people who are going to always reject you. Also, sometimes we need to go to therapy because that fear of rejection could come from a trauma, and all these fears can come from previous trauma. So ultimately, when you're having trouble overcoming a fear, you do need to see a mental health professional, a therapist, a counselor, to find out possibly where that trauma came from and deal with the trauma that's causing the fear. So that's a good segue into the next bullet point. How do you know when you need to see a mental health provider? Um, so when your fears or your phobias are interfering with your daily activities or relationships. So, your significant other wants to go on vacation that requires you to get on a plane and you keep saying no. So you're arguing with your significant other about whether or not you guys are going to take a vacation that requires you to get on a plane. That is an example. Also, sorry, I'm finding my spot back in my notes, y'all. Also, so it's interfering with your relationship. So imagine you have a fear of getting on the interstate. I've known people who do not like to ride on the interstate. They have a horrible fear of riding on the interstate. What happens when your commute becomes 30, 45 minutes longer because you cannot get on the interstate, right? That is when it's reaching the point where it's interfering with your daily activities, right? Because you're losing an hour to 2 hours a day because you're choosing to take the longer way to work because you're afraid of the interstate. That is interfering with your daily activities. So another reason you need to see a provider or a counselor or someone to help you, a professional, is because it may be causing significant distress or impairment, right? So not only is it interfering with your daily activities, you can't even go to work because you're scared of the traffic or whatever, right? You're having a problem. You're missing work. You're on the verge of getting fired, right? You're having panic attacks very frequently to the point where you're having significant chest pain and having to go to the ER frequently. That is where that's where it has reached a point where it's causing you significant distress or impairment. You need to see a professional. So when these fears and phobias start to impair other diagnoses, where it be substance abuse, depression, anxiety, when it's creating those things in an unhealthy way, right? To the point where it's bad anxiety to where you need to see a provider, you need to go to that provider about the anxiety, but you also need to talk about that fear, phobia that's frequently inducing that severe anxiety as well, right? You need to see a professional. Um, when your inability to go in social situations because of social phobia is causing extreme sadness that has tipped into depression, you need to see a professional. So those are the three scenarios when you need to see a professional. And just to clarify, when I talk about professionals or mental health professionals, I'm talking about a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a counselor, or a therapist. Sometimes even a social worker is a professional mental health provider. Now, I am a life coach. I'm a registered nurse, but I am not um, a mental health provider under that definition. You can see a coach before it has reached the point of seeing a professional, right? So a coach can help you with those things like exposure therapy or whatever. If you don't have that supportive significant other or family member that can help you with exposure therapy, a coach can before it gets to the point where you need to see a mental health professional, right? So a coach can help you eliminate the need of needing to see a mental health professional in the future. Um, and it can, but a coach cannot replace a mental health professional. A coach can work side by side with a health professional in your life, right? You could be seeing a mental health professional for your agoraphobia, right? Which is, fear of um, social situations, right? But you can also be setting goals and making plans with your life coach to properly engage in exposure therapy for those social situations. So, as always, I'd invite y'all, if you feel like you're at that stage where you don't necessarily need to see a mental health care provider, but you need help, you need support in overcoming a fear or a phobia. At Always Up Coaching, we always invite everybody to have a free discovery call, and that's just a free hour of life coaching. That's all it is. It's an appointment in which you make an appointment with me. I'll send you some paperwork to fill out so I can learn a lot about you before the hour that we meet, and we can make the most of your hour. And then we meet and we talk, and and often during that first hour, even if you don't become one of my clients, I help you set some realistic goals and help you start forming an appropriate plan to achieve those goals. So I invite you to make the free appointment. I always have open. I'm very liberal about the time I leave open for the free appointments, just because it's part of our mission is just to help people, right? And not everybody we help will be permanent clients, but we still find joy in living out our mission. So I invite you to make an appointment. So what to expect in therapy, right? So expect that there's going to be a full assessment. They're just going to, ask you a ton of questions, right? Um, and from those questions, they may give you some new diagnoses in addition to the phobia, and they may not. Then they're going to develop a treatment plan for you in conjunction with you. Any treatment plan that a provider makes for you needs to be made with your participation in the plan, right? You should be a part of that plan because nobody knows your life and your lifestyle better than you. So you should participate in the plan. So after that, you should expect them to use real techniques, real types of therapy. If you are at what is supposed to be a professional mental health provider, and I'm gonna caveat this with saying I'm a strong believer in alternative therapies in general. But if all they want to do is rub a crystal on your face, um, that is someone you may need to rethink, right? They need to be using other interventions as well, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, relaxation techniques, and things that have been proven through research to actually work for people. You want somebody who's going to be engaging in those types of techniques. And in addition to that, you're not just going to go see the counselor like 1 hour a week every week and then you're going to be cured in 6 months or a year, right? You're going to be given homework, just like I as a life coach give my clients homework. Nothing worth having, including overcoming fears, does not come without some level of work or input into it. So expect that your provider is going to give you some homework, some things to do all the time that will enhance the outcome or the effectiveness of your therapy. or your treatment plan. So take a moment, because we're about to talk about self-care as a part of managing fear, to remind y'all that every Saturday morning we have self-care Saturday. Now the usual time is at 11 a.m. And it's usually going to be live, but occasionally we may deliver a recorded program, me and my co-hosts, and I usually have co-hosts. And on Mondays I will sometimes have co-hosts. I just don't have any with me today, but me and my co-host will occasionally film it and just post the link on Saturday morning, post the video rather on Saturday morning, or we will go a little bit earlier. And this Saturday will be one of the Saturdays that we will have self-care Saturday, just a little bit earlier. It's going to be at 9 a.m. So we hope you will join us this Saturday at 9 a.m. Wake up, get your breakfast, your cup of coffee, your cup of tea, or whatever, and sit down and sip on it while we talk about self-care. And this week we're going to be in part 3 of self-care, emotional self-care, right? So we started about, this will be week 1, 2, 3. Wow. So self-care Saturday has been going on for 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. This will be week 5 of self-care Saturday. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. So I hope you join us. And what we're talking about, we're doing a series on emotional self-care and just taking care of your emotions and remaining emotionally healthy, right? So join us for part 3, and this is going to be the last of the emotional self-care series. And just come hang out with us on Saturday morning. Drink your coffee or tea while we talk about self-care. But when it comes to managing phobias and fears, the importance of self-care and managing fears is to prioritize your self-care, right? Prioritize getting that exercise in, because exercise releases endorphins that are calming, relaxing, and it fills with positive emotions. But also exercise regulates your brain chemistry, right? Those things that we said earlier put you at higher risk for having adverse outcomes from fears and phobias. Have a healthy diet, right? A healthy, balanced diet. Find the diet that works well with your stomach. Sometimes finding the healthy diet for you. Healthy diet varies from person to person. Different people have genetically different needs for vitamin intake. Believe it or not, it's true. So not every diet is for everybody. Some people need more of this or less of that, and vice versa, right? So actively work to eat a healthy diet and find the diet that is optimal for you. And get an adequate sleep for your brain to function optimally. And remember, fears and phobias come from the brain. You need healthy sleep. So Miss Deanna says, what time do we come on Saturday and on Monday Eastern time? So sorry, I forget not everybody's living in Central Standard Time. So Central Standard Time is an hour behind Eastern Time. So if we're coming on this Saturday at 9 a.m., we will be on at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. But our typical time on Saturday is 11 a.m., which will be 10 a.m. Eastern Time for you. And Miss Weaver, if you follow Always Up Coaching or my coaching page, which is the picture of me with AUPC, we post the events weekly, right? And usually we at least do it 3-4 days in advance. So if there's ever any confusion of what time it's supposed to be on, just go to the Facebook page and you'll see the event and it'll see the exact time. And Facebook, it's supposed to adjust it for whatever, they're supposed to adjust the event for whatever time you're in. So when you look at the event on the page, it should show as Eastern Time. But let me know if you find something different than that, okay? But it should show as Eastern Time when you see the event on the page. But definitely if you mark going, it'll also give you an alert in your notifications when we actually go live for that particular episode of Self-Care Saturday or Mental Health Monday. Thank you for that question. I'm sure other people had that question as well. So yeah, self-care is important. And as we move forward on Self-Care Saturday, we're going to talk about self-care, but we actually plan and hope sooner than later to actually be live in certain locations and invite people live in our area to attend live with us and film live. And sometimes we're going to be on location doing things like having a massage or getting our nails done. So we hope you can continue to watch with us on Mental Health Monday and Self-Care Saturday. So the last part of self-care and managing fears and phobias, and I mentioned this earlier, is just celebrating your success. When you're able to get on that plane and you make that first flight and you get off and you did it, with minimal impact on yourself, um, celebrate, right? Plan a treat for yourself. Like, if I get through this flight and I don't freak out, and I don't need TSA to arrest me on arrival to the new place, I'm gonna reward myself with a new handbag. I'm gonna go out to eat at my favorite restaurant. I'm gonna buy my favorite perfume. Whatever your version of a treat may be, celebrate yourself, treat yourself, let everybody know. Make a big deal out of it, because it is a big deal when you start to overcome your fears. So in general, it's always a good idea to celebrate your successes in general in life. Overcoming or working to overcome a fear, right? Or working to live with a fear is no exception to that rule. We have to be able to celebrate ourselves. So before I close out, let me open the inboxes and make sure nobody see if anybody inbox any questions. So give me a second, y'all. Let me check, because I don't want anybody's questions or concerns to go unaddressed here. I'm going to check. So if you haven't already, if you joined us later, I took a moment to remind y'all that we're having a giveaway. So don't forget to enter the giveaway. And as well, we're going to be giving away $100 cash and some journals, okay? Look, checking one more inbox, y'all. Okay, good. I think I covered everything, y'all. Let me just triple check a few things, so I don't want anybody to feel left out. All right, we're looking good. We're looking good. So if you had a question, for some reason I did miss it, feel free to inbox me, comment on here later. I will eventually catch it, right? Occasionally, Facebook puts things in weird places in our inbox, and I will be looking for it. So don't worry, I will find it eventually and will reply. But at any given moment, if you have a question of me as life coach, don't hesitate to inbox me. Okay, this is open all the time. My inbox is open for questions, comments, concerns. I'm here to help. I'm here to help. And don't forget, you can make an appointment at alwaysupcoaching.com for an hour. We're talking about an hour about whatever you want. Okay, but I like to talk for an hour about winning, whatever your version of winning is. Okay, so don't hesitate to do that as well. So I will say goodbye to y'all. I will see some of y'all again, hopefully on Saturday with Self-Care Saturday, and some of y'all on Monday again with Mental Health Monday. And until then, y'all have an awesome week. Remember to engage in self-care and celebrate all of your wins, y'all. Bye.